following is a class on Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 4, Text 26, given by His Holiness Srila Harikesa Swami, recorded on the 1st of June, 1987, in Buenos Aires.
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, Chapter 4, Text 26. Some, the unadulterated brahmacharis, sacrifice the hearing process and the senses in the fire of mental control, and others, the regulated householders, sacrifice the objects of the senses in the fire of the senses. So, in this description of tonight's verse of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is describing the situation of the ashramas. We have often spoke about varnashrama. The varnas are the brahmanas, kshatriyas, vaishyas, shudras. The ashramas are divided basically into two types or divisions. Those who are engaged in household life. Now, of course, household life is not a word which is generally used in the material society. We call it married life, or we call it whatever. But household life, grihastha. Griha means home. Grihastha means one who's got the home, lives at home, lives in a home. And there's no use to a home without a wife. So it implies everything that marriage implies, but it implies the maintenance of a home, family, society, nation, love, all these things which make the material existence more secure. So, grihastha situation, household situation, is one part of the ashrama dharma, and the other is renounced situation. Brahmacharya, vanaprastha, sannyas. In one situation, the person in the household life has a license for sense gratification. And in the other situation, there's no license. So, in this verse, Krishna is describing those two classes, according to the ashramas, and their particular types and forms of sacrifice. Because it is not a fact that if you are engaged in household life, that you don't have to be renounced in any way or engaged in sacrifice. In the real Krishna conscious system of practical spiritual life, renunciation is for everybody. Anybody who's in Krishna consciousness is renounced to some degree or another. After all, Krishna consciousness movement, for instance, where we are also practicing these ashramas, is not a place to go if you want personal economic development. It is not a place to go if you want to be glorified. It is not a place to go if you are looking to have a lot of sex life. For these things just don't come very easily to a Krishna conscious person in a Krishna conscious atmosphere. After all, we come to Krishna conscious projects to avoid the association of persons who are engaged in this manner. What to speak of other sinful things like meat eating, intoxication, gambling. So we find that Krishna conscious life is for those who have a taste for renunciation. And anyone who's a devotee of Krishna must have some taste. If you don't have some taste for renunciation like this, you just can't stay a devotee of Krishna. You have to give it up. Because being a devotee and experiencing a taste for renunciation to some degree is synonymous. It's not that, of course, everyone develops the same degree of renunciation, but the fact is that everyone must have some degree of renunciation. It is just that some are more renounced than others. So, in this situation of renunciation, there is a process of sacrifice. The sacrifice is required. Yajna. This yajna, or sacrifice, is required in spiritual life. In fact, everything is based on yajna. Now, sacrifice, when we even hear the word sacrifice, it conjures up images of goats with their heads getting chopped off, blood pouring out, and other horrible things. So this is not what we're talking about when we talk about sacrifice. We don't mean chopped off heads. Definitely we don't mean that. We're referring to the process by which a person may offer something which he has in the service of the Lord. And that doesn't include offering somebody else's head. It means you offer something which you've got in the service of the Supreme, according to the degree or the level of that opulence you may possess. Now, according to their ashrama, each of the two kinds of categories have a different form of possession, of opulence. And that is to be offered to Krishna. The category of brahmachari, meaning anyone who's following the system of brahmacharya, which means the brahmacharis, the vanaprasthas, and the sannyasis. Brahmacharya means renunciation from sex life. So they have a opulence. That opulence is the fact that they are mentally controlled. The whole situation of senses being out of control is a situation which arises from an uncontrolled mind. When the mind is uncontrolled, one cannot control the senses. Of course, if the senses are not controlled, one cannot control the mind. But it is not like a vicious cycle, because one who's a brahmachari, first thing he does is learns to control the senses. Then, automatically, the mind comes under control. And further, he controls the mind with philosophical knowledge. So control of the senses develops by acting actively for the sake of the spiritual master, following rules and regulations. This is all developing during the Gurukula time, when one is actually in school. Brahmachari Gurukule Vasandantor Guror Hitam. And he will work for the sake of the spiritual master, and thus will learn to control his senses. So, the brahmachari learns to control his senses and then learns to control his mind very strongly. That mind control, mental control, is a subtle opulence. So that hearing process and the sensual processes and all other processes, for instance, of various forms of restraint, are offered in the sacrificial fire of mental control. In other words, within that system of mental control of the brahmacharis, they offer their activities so that when they do something, these activities do not entangle them in material life, but rather they're taking these activities and offering them in the fire of spiritual yajna, sacrifice. Formerly, yajna was performed, formerly, yajna was performed formally by a fire with mantras being chanted in a very perfect meter, according to the proper time, and with the proper mood. And ghee was poured in the fire, and grains were thrown in the fire. So it was a very strict procedure. It had to be done just right. And part of the procedure, as we said before, was the mood, or the means by which the mantra, the ghee and the grain and the procedures were offered. Now, we've, I think, spoken before about the tantric arts, especially those which are more in the mode of ignorance. For instance, if you want to make something bad happen to somebody, then you have to start speaking the mantras in a very loud and harsh way, all worked up in a complete fit of passion, eyes red with anger, just hairs bristling, teeth clenched together, and mantras chanted. The mood is just as important as the chanting of mantras. Of course, we do not do that. We have nothing to do with such things. These things are for those who are materialists in the lower modes of material nature. So we don't have anything to do with that. But as an example of how you have to be in the right mood to chant some mantras properly, that's a good example. Anyway, the real mood, if you want to properly offer a sacrifice in the fire of yajna, must be that one does it if he's a brahmachari vanaprastha sannyas. He must do it in the fire of the controlled mind. He's offering all of these opulences which have been attained by his development of his Krishna consciousness throughout his life. He offers that within the fire. That doesn't mean he wastes it. It doesn't get burned up, and then he doesn't have it anymore. Not at all. But he offers his advancement and his austerity as the means by which the offering becomes perfected. In other words, if you don't have the proper amount of austerity, you can't even perform these processes properly. Without the proper amount of austerity, the fire sacrifice doesn't work. Just like starting the sacred fire. In former times, long time ago, they used to start the fire with the mantra. They didn't use matches or anything else. They used to just speak a mantra and call Agni into the fire, and Agni, the demigod Agni, would start the fire, and everything would go on. Then, long time ago, not so long time ago, they started using the Aruni wood, sacred Aruni wood and string, and by rubbing that wood on a pile of camphor, some spark would ignite, and some dry grass was there, and the fire would begin in that way. So, the initial creation of the fire was simply by mantra, because of the power that the performers of the sacrifice had. They had such enormous power because of austerity. Just like some yogis, by their enormous austerities, not nowadays, but of course nowadays also, but not on the earth planet that we know of, they can just step up on air. Just like we step up on stairways, they step up on the air. They have no problem to do this. We have enormous problems even to imagine that, because it is so much beyond our conception. Because it is a product of austerity. When one has proper austerity, then he can perform all kinds of activities which mystically, which are actually very mystical, which actually seem to be impossible for ordinary persons. It's austerity. Similarly, when a properly austere person engages in the process of yajna or sacrifice, he can accomplish things which cannot be accomplished. He can cause sacrifices to occur which ordinarily could never be successful. He can make rain occur. By properly chanting the mantras, if it's dry out, rain will come. If you do that particular kind of a yajna. And there are other yajnas also material. But we're talking here about a transcendental form of yajna. Now we've discussed the material yajnas to a certain degree just to give you an idea of yajna in general, just to give one an idea of austerity in general. But austerity, when used for a spiritual purpose, austerity engaged within a transcendental process, is transcendentally very powerful. Transcendentally very powerful. Therefore, when we engage in Krishna conscious activities for the satisfaction of the Supreme, and it is done within the austerity of the controlled mind, it becomes very powerful. And all success is attained. So this is the first platform. The offering of the sensual activities, such as hearing process, tasting process, smelling process, etc., into the fire of the controlled mind. Now the householders, or those who are engaged in the grihastha ashrama. Ashrama implies regulated. We're talking here about regulated persons. So they sacrifice the objects of the senses in the fire of the senses. Now, those who are brahmacharis have already offered the sense objects as a sacrifice to the senses long before. Now they're taking the senses themselves, the sensual activity itself, not the object, just the activity, and offering that into the fire of the mind. This is part of the yoga practice. This series of verses deals with yogic perfection. Now, the basic yogic procedure, if you know it, then you begin to understand these series of verses which Krishna is explaining. The basic yogic procedure is that one offers the objects of the senses to the senses and amalgamates the objects of the senses in the senses. Now, to explain what amalgamates means is a little difficult. But it means more or less to merge that potency of sense object into the sense so that it no longer has any controlling effect over the senses. One becomes detached from it, in fact. This similar form of amalgamation takes place on the next level when the senses are offered into the fire of mental control. Then the mind itself is offered into the fixed intelligence, and all of this is fixed into the situation of the soul. So, this Krishna consciousness process is also yoga. It is yoga. It is bringing one to the platform of surrender and sacrifice. But exactly how it's yoga is understood through these verses. For if you're just a good brahmachari, then you are sacrificing into the fire of mental control. And that's already a higher stage of yoga. The lower stage is the regulated householder. Regulated householder. This regulated householder is he who offers the objects of the senses into the fire of sensual control. Perhaps he has not yet attained the mental control, but he has attained the sensual control because of being regulated. So if you see it first as sense objects and senses, if you are not regulated, then the senses go after whatever sense object it wants, and there's no control. But if you regulate the senses, the sense objects are offered to the senses in a regulated fashion. That means control. There is control there of the senses because it's regulated when, where, and how these sensual objects are offered. So this is different. So that's the first platform of yoga. When you are a good regulated householder, that is the first platform of yoga, when the objects of senses are amalgamated into the senses. The second platform of yoga, this is strictly Varnashram Dharma now. We have not even gotten to being a yogi yet. Is when the senses themselves are amalgamated into the mental control of the brahmachari existence. So these are levels of yoga in the Ashtanga system. This mental control is already on the platform where you are above the pranayama process or perfected in the pranayama process. It's already so far to the point where the senses are withdrawn. Yam, niyam, asan, pranayam, pratyahara. The brahmachari process mentioned here is the pratyahara platform. It's already very advanced. You will not find anybody on the pratyahara platform today. Anywhere. maybe you could count them all on one hand, the fingers of one hand in the world, who have come even to the platform of pratyahara. And even if they existed somewhere, you would not find them because they would stop relating with anyone in the material world. Interesting dilemma, isn't it? So, the problems come to understand, for instance, in this household life, how the regulation is essential. Regulation is absolutely essential in household life. Because when one is regulated, he is controlling the mind, controlling the senses. Just like if you know every day you're going to get this much and no more, then you don't lust for any more. But if you expect more and you get less, you're frustrated like any. Let's say, for instance, I say to you, I'm going to give you now 3,000 Australies each. Before you leave this room, each one of you will have this much money in your hands. Now, I don't have to give you any money. There's no reason why I should give you any money, besides the fact that I don't have any. But there's no reason that I should give you any. This is not part of the process of Krishna consciousness, that you come here and I give you money. So you're not expecting any money, so there's no problem. You're not coming here with lust to get money. This is the last place you would come to think you're going to get some money. Now, but if I told you, now you're all going to get 3,000 Australies, now you would all become lusty to get that money. Isn't it? Sure. Now, if after telling you that you're going to get the 3,000 Australies, I only give you 1,000, you'll feel completely cheated. What is this 1,000? You said 3,000. Now, you weren't really supposed to get anything. You shouldn't expect anything. But because I raised your expectations by telling you definitely you're going to get 3,000, when I actually only gave you 1,000, you were disappointed. Even though you should have gotten nothing, and 1,000 is wonderful, one will be disappointed. Of course, I know some of you out there are saying, well, why don't you try me and let's see if I get disappointed. Anyway, so the point is that example here, that when one is expecting a lot, then he gets frustrated if he doesn't get it. And because he blew the whole thing, I forgot what my point was. Now I have no idea in the world why I was saying this. Let me think. Why am I saying this? Oh, God, what a decision. It's got blank. Now I understand. Now, if one is not regulated and he's expecting so much sense gratification all the time, every day he wakes up with a different form of expectation. I want this and I want this. I've got to get this. I've got to get that. And there's no restriction to it. Then, when he doesn't get it, and usually one does not get what he thinks he should get, he becomes frustrated and unhappy. Whereas if one is regulated, And he knows, today I will get this, tomorrow I will get the same thing, the next day I will get the same thing. It's like a Krishna conscious person wakes up in the morning, he doesn't have to worry about what clothes to put on. You got a dhoti, you stick it on. You got a kurta, you stick it on. It's not like you have to reach through your clothing and pick out this and pick out that. And like sometimes we have seen some people in the material world, they have these big, huge closets filled with every conceivable type of clothing in there. Then they stand before it. If I wear that, it will accomplish this purpose. But that may not be what I want tonight. So I'll try this one. They pull that out, they try this by the mirror. Put it back, try another one. Because of not having any particular regulation there, in other words, you can wear whatever you want, and you've got such a big choice, that the mind becomes agitated or some confusion sets in. And one is not fixed in that way. And no matter what he puts on, later on he may regret it. This also happens. So, when one is free to choose so many things, then one becomes actually not very peaceful. When one is regulated, first of all, his life goes much faster. He doesn't have to struggle to make choices at every moment, how he shall act, what he shall accomplish, what he wants. He doesn't get frustrated because he is freed from having to suffer the pains of mental problems created by choosing all the time. Just like sometimes the devotees, they ask me, what do I want to eat? And it's a question which I just cannot handle. And always I just answer, just give me something. I don't. Because if now I have to think about all of the different varieties of food and then figure out what I want. And then I have to say, well, I think I want this and that and this. So then my mind will expect I will get that. Then when they actually bring it, it will not be there. That which I most wanted will not be there. Then I ask, why not? Then they say, there was no this or that. Then I say, oh. Then why did you ask me in the first place what I wanted, if when I tell you what I want, you tell me there is no, we could not? There's nothing more frustrating in the whole universe than to be told to pick what you want to eat. Then you say it, and then they do not bring it. Practically, it is the most horrible thing you can do to somebody. Because the mind gets all fixed on eating this thing. Formerly before, they asked, we never thought about any eating. We couldn't have cared less what to eat. Had no idea whatsoever to eat this or that. But because they asked, we had to think about it. Then the mind got attached because the senses started getting active. But then later on, it never gets fulfilled. This is the story of life. Factually, life in general is like this. Just like they ask you when you're a little child in school. I know they asked me anyway. What do you want to be when you grow up? You're not going to believe this, but I used to tell the teachers I wanted to be a garbage man. I don't know why. I never thought about it, but when they asked me, what do I want to be? I thought, maybe a garbage man. I don't know. Because my mother always had me empty the garbage. So this was like an occupational duty. Anyway, this has absolutely nothing to do with Krishna consciousness, but the point is that somebody may ask you, what do you want to be? And what do you want out of life? And what do you expect? And what are your goals? And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So people, they set so many goals and they have so many desires and so many things. And how many of them do they actually accomplish? Very few. Practically nothing. Hardly anything is accomplished out of all of this. So then one becomes frustrated. I think, my personal opinion, and I'll bet you a lot of you agree in this room, in these two statements were two no-nos. You should never say I think, and neither should you say I bet you. But anyway, I think that everybody in the material world's frustrated. Isn't it so? Does anybody in this world, in the room, think that not everybody's frustrated? Yeah, I'm sure there's somebody. Yes, here's a brave soul who has raised a hand, who says not everybody's frustrated. But I say everybody ultimately, even if they think they're not frustrated now, will be frustrated. Old age, disease, and death make you frustrated. Even if now one thinks he's not frustrated, he will become frustrated. Because nobody likes to lose youth. Nobody likes to get disease, lose health. Nobody likes to suffer death. These things create frustrations. Because there was a nice state, it became bad. We get frustrated. And then we get frustrated because we cannot complete our plans. We cannot complete our plans. Therefore, ultimately, we are all frustrated. But factually, most have some frustrations there, even now. How is it? Just like everyone has their dream of what they wanted to be, or the girl they wanted to marry. Instead, they got, she's not bad, but you know, not the one of my dreams. Everybody has these fairy princesses in their dreams. And all of the girls, they have these shining heroes who will ride up on the white horse, sweep them up in their arms, ride off into the sunset. So everybody has these dreams, especially in the teenage years. There are all these images, romance, and all of this business. So generally one ends up with the next best choice or something reasonable or something tolerable like this. But never does one find the one of his dreams. Okay, maybe sometimes it happens. But I'd like to make a survey of all of the people who found the girl of their dreams. And make a survey over 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years to see if it's still like that. Now, I have seen personally, because it was very interesting to look at such things. Prabhupada used to make this story of chief ministers used to tell the king like this. But anyway, I don't want to get entangled in telling a story, so I skipped it. The point is, you see, in old age, that one is frustrated because he's old. And he's no longer able to enjoy chasing his dreams in the same way. We have seen old people Like, for instance, they're together with the wife. So there's the old husband and the old wife. Then a young girl walks by. So you know exactly what's going to happen. The old fellow is just sometimes even completely turned around and staring. And the amazing thing is not that he's looking at the young girl. This makes perfect sense. The amazing thing is that the wife couldn't care less. That is amazing. I mean, if you analyze it in different ways. But what it means is this guy so useless? Nobody going to care about him anyway. So who cares what he does? If it makes him happy, fine, great. Even so old, still maintaining great desires for enjoying some young girl. No capacity whatsoever to do it. But just simply completely fixed in the mind, some plan. And this is frustration in the material world. Everybody ends up this way. Now, next time you are in such a company of older persons, and you see this happening, because now I've told you, now you'll think about it. So, now you should think this way, that this man here is what I'm going to become very soon. I mean, unless you're a woman, you shouldn't think like that. But then you should think, this old woman here, I'm going to become this. So, now, one should understand that this is what's going to happen to me. Look in the mirror one day and see all these nice young features. Then mentally start to put some big bags under the eyes and more chins over here and hair's all gray and falling out. Start to actually get into the fact that I may have made so many plans for enjoying in the material world, but factually I'm going to be frustrated in all these plans. So why should I bother so much? Here I am just trying to arrange material things for my gratification, but factually I'm just simply going to end up in frustration. Therefore, one should learn the art of seeing this way, that frustration is there, and that it comes because I can never realize my plans. This is actually a very deep philosophical point, although it sounds so simple. I can never realize my plans. But because I can never realize my plans, I have to take birth again. Simply for this reason. Because I have not realized all my plans, I must take birth again. Now, this is incredible. For this one little thing, I come back to realize my plans. And in fact, such persons take birth with these plans already fixed in their minds from when they're very small. From when they're very small, they have these plans fixed in their minds. And it is very difficult for them to get these out of their minds. And even in the next lifetime, they may not be able to succeed. And frustration grows even more. Frustration, life after life, grows. Actually, it reaches a big level of frustration. That's why you find in this world so many persons are drunkards. If they're not drunkards, then they're hidden drug addicts. Just like one study I saw in America showed 80% of all the housewives were hooked on some form of barbiturates or another in the guise of pills they get from doctors. The biggest business is for doctors to simply be prescribing real drugs in the guise of medicine, because everybody's frustrated and they've got this problem, and really it's just mental. So the doctors, they can see this, so they just give a tranquilizer. But they call it this, they call it that. Or they give some other kind of barbiturate. So this is a symptom of frustration. And the amazing thing is, you even ask such a person, are you frustrated? They will say no. Are you happy? Oh, yes. So if you're not frustrated and happy, then why you go get drunk and lay on the floor? Why are you taking these pills? Why are you taking all of this other business? Because if you're happy, then what do you need to take all these things for? You're already happy. No, we are not very honest with ourselves. We don't really understand the situation that we are in. Therefore, we accept some status that we're presently in as a status of good enough. But in fact, if we could compare to the spiritual status of blissfulness, all of this material well-being, happiness or whatever, would be realized for what it is, frustration. That factually, we are continuously trying to enjoy something which we can never enjoy. This body, because I'm not the body. You can never enjoy the body because you're not the body. Only temporarily some sensual satisfaction, and then it's gone. That's also frustrating. I'm not this body. How can I enjoy it? That's the ultimate source of frustration. Therefore, one should learn the art of regulation, regulated life, regulated action, specifically acting in such a way that I'm always thinking about controlling the raging passion and ignorance of the material world. And that I won't develop frustration because I've got no desire or plan to fulfill. This is the Krishna conscious person's course of action in his life. To become freed from frustration by not having any plans which are frustrated. His plan is to go back to Godhead. He has no plans for material success. Therefore, he is never materially frustrated. He has no plans for making sense gratification. Therefore, he's not frustrated when it doesn't come. He accepts everything. Under the service of Krishna, as it comes naturally without struggle. Therefore, he's peaceful and happy. This is actually renunciation. To do everything for Krishna, never expect anything in return. That's actual renunciation. And such a person, in such a renounced order of life, can actually be happy and prosecute Krishna consciousness. So actually we haven't even gotten to the point of discussing the Krishna conscious forms of sacrifice because we ran out of time. But at least we've tried to give some indication of renunciation, of austerity, and the requirement of regulated life according to the indications of this verse. Hare Krishna.